It is not useful to heed nor receive unsolicited advice. It sabotages you, your mind, and that relationship, which frankly should be dumped. Greetings and welcome to my official rant series on why things suck. In this video, I will harangue about why unsolicited advice is f***ing dangerous. This is actually also one of my most favorite things to rant about. In fact, I'm pretty sure if I listen to all those losers and unqualified assholes who told me what to do, I become a f***ing loser like them right now. I mean, seriously, what? Come on, are you an expert on my life? First up, these people usually have no idea what the full context of the situation is. Yes, they may have more experience than you. Yes, they may be older. Or yes, maybe they like to show off a lot. But seriously, each situation is different and not everything that was the same before is the same now. In fact, claiming to be an expert on somebody else's life without being in that unique situation is complete bull. It is like seeing only one side of the apple and not turning it around to see that it is rotten. Secondly, they sometimes do it out of jealousy or some kind of sick voyeurism. Yes, there are people out there who are jealous of you, who will sabotage your life by doling out so-called advice, or just by telling you to do things that they wish they could do if they were presented that opportunity that you have. They just want to live through you voyeuristically whilst you bear the consequences. And if you think about it, really, unsolicited advice is kind of self-serving. Like parents, for example. Maybe they keep sending you to ballet classes even though you don't want to, and because back then when they were 6 or 7 years old they failed at ballet miserably, so now they try to control you to do the things that they wish they could do at that age so that they could feed off you and live through you. Next, people who give unsolicited advice tend to think they know better than you and put themselves in a dominant position against you. Let's think about it. There are know-it-alls, arrogant people who believe that you are incompetent to make your own decisions on your life. I mean, okay, look, it's okay if you seek out advice, but it is different. That is different from getting unsolicited advice. I mean, they're basically giving you advice as if they are an expert on everything just because they're older, or they've done this once before, or they just want to talk and have really low EQ when it comes to giving out advice. Like, for example, an old fat British guy who believed his opinion on everything is gold and is correct, when he was just really an old fat pathetic loser who has no ambitions or personal goals in his life and basically essentially squandered his youth on stupid shit, and who is now jealous of other youths who got their shit together earlier than he did. Again, if you don't understand the full context of the situation, just shut your mouth and off. And some other idiot I know with a looking website that looks like it was from the early days of the internet giving me advice on how to design my website and resume? Are you serious, bro? You don't even have a f***ing resume, you hobo. I mean, unless you specifically ask for it, no one should take the advice of fallen losers. I mean, seriously, if you want to become a chef or a fitness model, don't seek out or listen to the unsolicited advice from people who don't know how to cook or people who are unfit and fat as fuck. Finally, it could cause even more strain in those relationships and actually give you more doubts about your decisions and yourself. I mean, seriously, when you receive unsolicited advice, how do you feel? Do you feel confident, assured by this person? Or do you feel insulted, ridiculed, that this human being didn't believe you were capable of leading your own individual life? Well, that's exactly that. It causes strain in a relationship and gives you even more doubt than ever before that you don't already need. In fact, it is not useful to heed nor receive unsolicited advice. It sabotages you, your mind, and that relationship, which frankly should be dumped. As usual, this is by no means an exhaustive list, so if you can find any more reasons why unsolicited advice is dangerous, please go ahead and comment on this video below. Okay, so as expected, unsolicited advice is, well, unsolicited, unexpected, like a predator that ambushes you from the darkness. In other words, you cannot control them, and you can only control how you choose to receive or respond to them if you do. So, what can we do should we receive such predatory attacks? Now, I'd like to do something a little bit different for this video. So, on my screen right here, I'll be sharing with you some interesting quotes about unsolicited advice. Personally, I've always hated unsolicited advice and have never chosen to act on any I had received in my life, and I'm glad because none of those idiots were qualified to give me advice for those specific situations. But looking at it objectively, here is some logic to go behind my rant. Firstly, to offer a man unsolicited advice is to presume that he doesn't know what to do or that he can't do it on his own. By John Gray. Now, should you receive unsolicited advice, firstly, you might want to consider the person's delivery, tone, and language, and then decide if it is worthy advice at all. Firstly, delivery. So, is it via email? Did you receive a phone call, text, or did you meet in person and they delivered this unsolicited advice? How did they deliver it? Now, it's easier usually to gauge one's intent in person than via email, but the choice of words they choose when they tell you this advice usually reveal their intent as well. For example, are they using positive words? Did they sugarcoat the words? Or are they phrasing it in a way that implies some form of negative connotation or negative view on you? How is their tone when they gave you this unsolicited advice? Did they use a mocking, condescending tone as most unsolicited advice givers do? Now, scientifically, it is fact that most people who give unsolicited advice seek power and dominance in a situation or feel like they have something to prove to their ego and self-esteem by elevating themselves in their authoritative position. In other words, it is them and not you. Personally, the tone, delivery, and language used to phrase that unwarranted advice, really, it does give the person's intent away or shows their true colors to a certain extent, which then leads to my next point and the next quote. There is a time to provide advice and offer an opinion, and there is a time not to. Don't be too quick to offer unsolicited advice. It certainly would not endear you to people. Harvey Mackay. Now, consider your relationship with that person and his or her background. Usually it's a he, by the way. Is this person important to you? Does this person have any legitimate qualifications to back up their views? In other words, is this your typical garbage collector trying to give you advice on how to become a CEO? Or is this an actual experienced manager doing so? And no, even if they were your boss or your mother, does not mean they are qualified to, let's say, talk to you about the real estate market, for example. Yes, everyone can have an opinion and view, as long as they're not giving you actionable, unsolicited advice. Even so, relationship and connection with this person is important to put into perspective when it comes to considering where this advice is coming from. To be honest, let's be real here. Most friends can hardly be neutral or objective when giving advice, and those that can usually have something to gain from it or do it out of some form of entitlement and self-superiority complex. Parents are guilty of being the worst unsolicited advice givers out there. Remember, just because they created you doesn't mean they know everything or are always right. Now, personally for me, I have no qualms about cutting off people that give repeated unsolicited advice. For example, if let's say they are a retired fat old British man trying to give you advice on how you would change careers when they have zero passion for their own work, or trying to give you startup advice when they themselves never ever founded a company, that's the worst, by the way. Or maybe some random kid trying to tell you how to design your website when their own website looks like a Craigslist. You really ought to consider severing all ties to these toxic losers and only surround yourself with the winners. Again, a worthy topic for another conversation. Now, finally, unsolicited advice is usually more about the needs of the giver than the receiver, by Charles F. Glassman. Now, consider where you already stand with your own decisions and your own beliefs. Usually for me though, when I seek advice or another opinion, I would already have come to a conclusion in my own mind on my own about which choice I'm going for. And I'm really just seeking opinions and advice just to get a fuller, bigger picture of alternatives. Now, advice itself is okay. It is the unwarranted extra advice you get that is complete bull. And I would actually only recommend heeding or considering to heed only the advice that you sought after. And understand who you are and be resolute in your own decision making. Because just remember, the records show that about 80% of unsolicited advice givers are giving free, unwarranted advice mainly to appease their own ego or narcissism, boost their own self-esteem, I know it's kind of weird, I don't know why they do that, and perhaps also they're arrogant and want to show off their knowledge about everything and anything. And really, Ultimately, it's all about believing in yourself and in your choices. And as for anyone that tells you what you should do, just remind yourself that they are actually just egos lacking self-esteem, and they're also not your friends. They're just people who like to judge and believe in their false sense of superiority and intelligence. And to be honest, no really, no matter what advice or unsolicited advice you receive, they are just not you. So to be objective about it all, I'd first gauge how often this person gives me unsolicited advice. And then from there, over repeated meetings with this person, determine patterns in his or her, usually is a he though, tone, language, use and delivery of the message, and engage if this person is still useful or pleasant enough to maintain a continued relationship with. If not, just cut off ties. And remember, once you've made up your mind on which path you're going for, regardless of the advice you receive, don't waver, don't shake, stick to it to the bitter end, and don't let those fools with opinions bring you down to the ground that they came from. So there you have it. This is why unsolicited advice is f***ing dangerous. If you're serious about not falling to the trappings of these unscrupulous, unpleasant advice givers, then don't be afraid to cut off all those ties if you can. In fact, just remember that these individuals who give free advice are usually internally inadequate, and that only you are qualified to speak for yourself and make the decisions that you make on your life. Now it's time to think for yourself and ask yourself these questions. Do you believe unsolicited advice is poisonous to you? What would you do the next time you receive unsolicited advice? Go on and comment your thoughts below. But no spam, please. Especially if your spam contains unsolicited advice. That's just wrong, man. Alright, so this is it for now. We've come to the end of this rant. Now, if you had fun, had a good laugh, or learned something new today, then please like this video by poking the like button. And if you like a lot of my videos, then perhaps it actually makes much more sense and to make things easier for yourself to subscribe to my channel by hitting the subscribe button and ringing the little notification bell for updates. Now then, this is Vicki Lau, signing off.